Welcome back, Senior Devs. Sean Cannon here. In this lesson, we're going to talk about privacy. This module won't be as long as the previous module that discussed security. If you happen to skip that one, please watch that first. While most customer privacy is at the mercy of the product team, like whether or not to sell data, how much to capture in forms, or to pre-opt in users to email campaigns for affiliates, the dev team can take extra precautions to protect privacy in the event of a data breach. The two precautions I want to cover in this module are redaction and the principle of least privilege. We already covered the principle of least privilege a bit, but how does it apply to privacy? In the same way we don't want to hand out database passwords to users who don't ever need to run database queries, we also don't want to expose customer information to people internally who don't need the information. If our application logs users as they are created, then the logs are potentially a data goldmine, and if anybody ever got their hands on the logs, they could scrape and collect thousands of email addresses, phone numbers, and whatever else is being logged. I don't want to imply that the people internal to your project would steal customer data, but if they have the customer data, they could lose it. I've witnessed people working on the train that have had their laptop stolen from them in a flash robbery. Someone grabbed a laptop and ran off the train right as the doors were closing. If the victim was a software engineer and had a local production data dump or log dump on the laptop, just imagine how much customer information is instantly at risk. You could have all the security in the world on your production app, but if it's taken from a dev, it's gone all the same. As a senior engineer, you need to be thinking about keeping data safe and secure at all times. Simply put, if it's not your personal data, then you are in no position to put it at risk. You need to be the one in meetings voicing your concerns and protecting the data. Junior devs don't understand the risks, and executives don't understand the technology. Sometimes we have to log stuff or expose data publicly. Personal profile information that's stored in a JSON web token, for example, that's not secure. We have to assume it's going to be intercepted and logged by our ISP or DNS servers or something. Even if we're on HTTPS, JWTs are often attached to query strings, so they're not in the encrypted payload. They're encoded, not encrypted, and decoding them is no harder than pasting them on jwt.io and seeing the contents of the token. Knowing this, we need to redact all the data that's not critical to identity. It may be convenient to store a user's address and phone number in their JWT profile because maybe it's sitting there so nicely next to their name and email address in the database. But if the address and phone number are never checked in the auth gates, then redact them, omit them completely from the token. In most of my web applications, I use an MVC mindset, and so I typically do the redaction at the controller level because I want the models to be raw behind the scenes. I have a function called omit private fields, which I put as the last step of every controller because this is the response that will be sent to the route, which is ultimately sent back to the user. I don't do the redaction in the route itself because if my controller happens to be used in multiple routes, I don't want to burden each of those routes with the same responsibility. In my application's primary config file, I typically create a dictionary of all the private fields associated with each model. Typical private fields for a user might be password, SSN, or token. Typical private fields for an order might be credit card number, where you might want to return the last 4 digits used, but not the entire number. You can see how this would scale. It's important to appreciate here that these patterns shouldn't be limited to any stack or application. Almost all applications have a data layer and a UI layer, even if the UI is a CLI. Which data gets presented to which user can absolutely be controlled by you, regardless if you're building a website, a video game, or a promotional kiosk at a mall. Lastly, it should be obvious, but I'd be remiss to not mention that we never want to log plain text passwords or store them in a token. It's bad enough that I still see databases storing plain text passwords, but to expose them in the logs or in tokens is even worse. You're just asking to get hacked. That wraps up this module. Keep growing, and I'll see you in the next one.